If you had like a plastic guitar and it was hanging up in the shower, that would be sick.
Yeah, let's get Rain Song or CA to get to work on that. I rip off, I'm creatively inspired by stuff from a ton of electric guitar players that might be somewhat unique.
Hey everyone, so we have another guest here. I hope you're liking all these interview videos. But today we're talking to Zeb Snyder. You probably know him from YouTube as well. He's got a bunch of instructional stuff. He's got a beautiful, beautiful beard. And rather than talk anymore, let's talk to Zeb. Hey man, how you doing?
Pretty good, man. How's it going?
Good. So you must be staying in a whole lot, just like me, right? With all this craziness going on.
Yeah, trying to hunker down. We the Appalachian Roadshow, the band that I play with, released a new album today, so it was good to have something to focus on and kind of work on the internet a little bit and try to do what you can to promote it.
Dude, it's a tough time for everyone's like promotional cycle. Like you can't tour it, you can't promote it. It's tough with the albums, man.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to be interested to see. I mean, at least the albums provide something for people to go to when they can't get the live performances. So that could be a positive thing for everybody. But we'll see. It's unprecedented, so it's not like we can compare to anything, I think.
It's true. It's true. So tell me a little bit about that family band.
It wasn't really planned out because my parents were not musicians to start with. They were just music fans. But they wanted my sister. Now, my sister Samantha's like 3.5 years younger than me. So they got us started on classical violin and guitar and the Suzuki method just because it was like a well-established way for kids to learn. And we did that, and I enjoyed it and I kept up with it, but I wasn't really passionate about it. But at the same time, we were all going to concerts and listening to Bluegrass records. And I was way more into bluegrass and 90s country and stuff like that. After a certain point, I started flatpicking, and my sister started playing fiddle tunes, and we were doing little performances here and there, just local stuff as a duo. And we wanted to try to expand our sound, so we asked Daddy if he'd learn to play bass with us. He said that he couldn't, so we bought him a bass for his birthday, upright Cremona bass, and
yeah.
I taught him how to play, so it's sort of a little bit of a twist on the traditional family band thing. I taught my dad how to play.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. That's funny. I like the twist here, right? Normally dad's, sort of masterminding the thing, and you have to learn this instrument.
It was fun, man. He really did a great job. He did everything. He never really took lessons on his own. He never really, he was working full time, but we never did the family band thing to make a living. It was something we wanted to do creatively as a very intense hobby, I guess. So he was working full time. So all he had time to do was get ready for our shows. And I was just teaching him our set list, but he did a tremendous job at it. And some of our stuff got pretty far out by the time, we put out our last album. I was writing instrumentals with Danny Gatton and Steve Morslicks in them and doing crazy stuff and key changes and timing signature changes. And he kept up with all of it. So when the virus is not in full swing, I'll teach in person a little bit. I'm in Lexington, North Carolina, and I teach in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, a couple days a week at Main Street Music and Bone Shop. Yeah,
that teaching lifestyle. I'm all about that.
It's incredible the stuff you get to do, especially teaching on SKYPE. I've got, students all over the country, some of which have been taken from me since 2017. So since I play a couple different instruments, I even get to teach like entire families. Like I teach like a family band, every one of the instruments that I know, and then my sister will teach the fiddle player, and we'll have the whole thing covered. And it's made me better too. I'm sure you've experienced that with teaching. It's like teaching it over and over again makes different things click in your head, and then it makes you better, and then you get better at explaining it to the next guy, and it's just a totally beneficial process.
Talking that way, thinking about like as a teacher, what do you learn by teaching? I feel like the forms of fiddle tunes, the structures of fiddle tunes, it's remarkable how teaching the same, like 5 starter tunes over and over again really forces you to understand the tune and really know how it's built. A really good example of that, you already know all this, but I'm going to teach it to you anyway. Taking a tune like, Red-Haired Boy, and we don't have to put our capos on because no mandolin players are watching. If you take that tune and you look at all the different phrases, they're all the same length, which is really interesting, right? Think about like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and of course the tag at the end that you get to improvise, right? Well, that's incredibly important to teach someone as they're learning the fiddle tune. Like, not only do you now know the fiddle tune, but this is the structure that it's built out of. This is how you might structure an improvisation over it.
And I try to stress vocabulary a lot too, like the things that carry over from tune to tune. I told my students before, there's like different ways that I approach fiddle tunes. I can kind of learn it enough to jam it, to play it in a jam session on the fly. I can get there pretty quick and by using common stuff, and there might be some rough edges on it, but I can definitely use all the vocabulary I've got to make it happen on the spot. And then if I'm going to work something up for playing on stage, or let's say I'm doing a competition or whatever it is, then I'll be a lot more careful, and I might look up a couple different versions and try to get down to some of the core stuff that really is going to make a difference for like your best version.
It's interesting too, like getting jam ready for a tune, how loose of a structure you can actually have for the tune. I always have students that are surprised. They're like, man, how are you at a jam? And like you hear the melody and like you're the third person in the line and you're like ready to go by the time it comes to you. And it's funny talking about that. And you're like, well, I'm not really ready. Like maybe I've grabbed a couple details and I know what I'm going to do already. I have a way that I'm going to structure it, but I certainly don't know the tune. Not the way that I know Red-Haired Boy.
Yeah, you kind of take it down. Like you've got your broadest parameters. Like, for me, the chord progression comes first because that's the first thing that I want to do is not transgress against the chord progression. And then after that, if you get that down, you can pretty much play a solo in the jam as long as you know how to respond to that, obviously. But then, after the chord progression, if you've got time, you can try to get as many essential elements of the melody as you can fit in there, on the spot. So, yeah, it just kind of depends on how quickly you can do it. But there's a couple different levels you can go through to try to know your version down.
It's also interesting how you might pick up smaller and smaller sort of details of the melody, like talking about a melody that could have a lot of eighth notes in it, like Big Scioto, right? A melody like that, like where if I was hearing Big Scioto for the first time, I might hear like or whatever its simple kind of just shape of the tune as opposed to all of those individual notes.
Yeah, I try to encourage my students that are trying to figure out how to do stuff on the spot, kind of what you just said, look for some of the most important notes of the song, like the notes that stand out to you the most. And then I use the Nashville number system all the time when I'm teaching, so I'll say try to hear that note and identify what number it is, and then you can figure out what octave you want to play it in. And for me, if I can hear it's almost like connect the dots. If those dots are the notes, the essential notes of the tune that we've picked out that stand out to you, and you know where they stand in the scale, you can fill in the space in between them pretty easily.
I imagine someone hearing Blackberry Blossom and hearing it's just a descending major scale and there's a bunch of stuff in between the lines, and people interpret that information differently. But if I had to sing Blackberry Blossom, if I had to put lyrics to it, the melody is not going to be as quick as it is when I flat pick it.
Right.
What about the ends of fiddle tunes? Do you feel I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Do you think that the ends of A parts and B parts are important? Because a lot of times that's where people disagree. You get to the end of a melody and it's just everyone's different at the end.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of times they're not. And it just sort of depends, I think, on how you wind up learning the tune. I would say there are a lot of tunes, in my opinion, that have a ton of gray area at the end of the section. There might be ones that I've heard good versions of it so many times that I do have a particular idea of how I want to play it. But so many times that's either something that you have to interpret in your own way, or it's a good place to play a lick. if you want to depart from the melody a little bit or show a little bit more flash, that's a good place to do it. A lot of times when I'm teaching people how to improvise, that's the first thing we'll do when we're talking about putting licks into a fiddle tune, is play a Tony Rice lick or something cool at the end of the section, because it's a pretty safe place to do it. You can even, I talk all the time about not ignoring the chord progression, but you can sort of steamroll over that 5 sometimes.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's like I'm taking lessons from myself. Yeah, I think we agree on a lot of this stuff. When I teach people how to improvise, I do the exact same thing. I take a tag phrase, and normally the archetype I teach them is like, right, and I'm like, hey, this phrase is ba-da-doot and da-da-doot and da-da-doot, root note. Right. And if you can create variations of that, or if we can learn more versions of that, man, improvising over fiddle tunes is going to be really easy, because there's so many different, well, even without improvising, there's so many different iconic versions of that phrase, right? Right. Or, right, they're all the same phrase. So if we can just use different variations of that, it's huge.
Yeah, that's a great starting place for sure. You can move into creating longer narratives that sort of wrap in and out of the melody and the chord progression. But if you want a shorter place to start, go for the end of the section.
I feel like I've done 3 of these interviews now. I guess one of them hasn't come out yet, but I've done 3 now, and a lick has come up every single time. So I'm just gonna invite you. You got a cool phrase you want to share with the world?
Oh yeah, I got one that might be somewhat unique. So that's a couple cool things going on in there.
Is that a slide and a pull off?
Yeah, and that's dangerous territory when you're flat picking. You don't want to do too much of that, but I think it's in a triplet phrasing, or somehow it's sort of it's like that stuttering Stevie Ray Vaughan kind of thing. So it has enough force behind it to where it doesn't, give out on sustain. But that's some Tony Rice ways to get out of it. I think what made me think of that initially was trying to, because that's basically a B flat triad, right? So I'm thinking about, it's just a little bit different than most blues licks you hear. It's still pretty much straight ahead blues scale stuff, but it's just a little bit of an unconventional way of doing it.
Yeah, that's really unique. This is cool too. The idea of actually hitting a C there, and it feels more like, it feels like it's baked into like minor pentatonic kind of feeling, as opposed to if it was really implying like G7 or something.
I'll do a couple things out of this shape, because sometimes I'm thinking of that as like a B flat triad, but I prefer to think of it as like 5 flat 7 flat 3, just so I know everything's there. And one of my big heroes outside of bluegrass is Dickie Betts. And Dickie would do those sequences of pull-offs that had that like rhythmic drive to it. So in addition to that particular flat picking lick I did, you can kind of get hung in this box doing a pull-off to your ring finger there, pulling off from the root note to the 7. So you could kind of just that out instead of it being just one double stop. Yeah, I've ripped off a ton of stuff from Dickie Betts, man. He's kind of like the Doc Watson of electric guitar. There's so much, because he's using fairly clean tone, and he's not relying on the sustain near as much as average. I mean, there's still plenty of singing sustain there, but he's fairly busy, right? And there's a lot of country inspiration in his playing. So it's been, I rip off, I'm creatively inspired stuff from a ton of electric guitar players, but Dickie's one of the most accessible ones for flat pickers, I think.
When we were emailing, we were talking about rhythm playing a little bit. I feel like you had some interesting ideas about that. Maybe a nice way to phrase the question would be, what faults do you see in a lot of bluegrass rhythm guitar players?
A lot of times, one of the biggest things that I see, I'll just go ahead and make it funny so that I don't sound like a jerk. We're just having fun with this. I'll see this. Barry Abernathy from the band calls it a flat tire, right? It puts you off balance. I guess the best way to break it down we were talking earlier about how as you teach, you get better and better at understanding things and then explaining them. And I've actually been working on this a little bit recently. I've always taught the same concepts, but like the way I put it changes as I try to get better at what I do. And lately I've tried to push the idea that you want to keep your pattern smooth so that you have options for dynamics. If there's a big dynamic push in each one of your patterns, first of all, it's going to get old, and second, it takes your options away. So, what I want to do is have a really smooth pattern. I build it up from, bass and strum is the most basic foundation that you should have, because your bass note falls on the upright bass and your strum falls on the mandolin. So whatever you do after that, you want to make sure you don't lose that. You can add to it, but you don't want to lose it. So the first thing I teach is sort of the intro to the Jimmy Martin and then further the Tony Rice idea of rhythm playing, which is you take like two of those bass and strum patterns and you add some upstrokes to the second one. And that certainly is not the only option, but that's a great place to start if you bring that up to speed. And that's pretty smooth.
One thing you did that was really good there too, for the people that may be trying this at home, you should listen to how strongly Zeb is hitting where the mandolin chop would be, even when he adds in the upstrokes. The upstrokes aren't as loud as your downstrokes, which is really important. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. Those essential elements that I mentioned at the beginning are still the strongest things. We're just filling in more texture. Yes.
You don't, as a guitar, you want to have a great groove, a really strong groove, but you don't have one specific responsibility for a part of the timing like the bass and the mandolin do. So you're there to provide more texture and enhancement.
It's funny that the guitar is such a it's a rhythm powerhouse. Like if we're talking about like a boom chuck style rhythm, we're the only instrument that can be both boom and chuck. No other instrument can do it, which is super interesting. So yeah, just like you're saying, we act as sort of a glue to hold everyone together, and it means that as that glue, we have to be reactive to the situation. Sometimes when I see like a bass player that's like totally drowning, I'll lean on the bass part more. I'm like, all right, I'm over here, I'm helping you, like me and you, we're good. Or the same thing's true with the mandolin player, right? You can actually react to how the band feels and what's happening in a given instant to fix it, to patch it, to glue it together. I have a friend that I'm gonna a little bit make fun of here, but he's a local fiddle player. Maybe I won't say his name. Everyone who knows me knows who it is, though. He's a young guy. He's awesome. He's an incredible player. And I heard a story about him where someone was like, "Hey man, what are you thinking about when you play that? What is it that like is going through your head?" And the fiddle player says back, "Well, I'm thinking like I'm a child and I'm like lost in the grocery store and like I can't find my mom, but like I'm trying to find my way back," and like gave this very woo-woo explanation. And it's funny because you laugh about it and you're like, oh yeah, what the hell are you talking about? But then you listen to the break, you listen to it back, and you're like, yeah.
It hits everybody different, I think. I tend to stay fairly grounded when I'm playing because, I don't know, I think what inspires me the most a lot of times is music itself. So I don't really use a ton of other imagery in my head to help me play, which I don't mean to sound too stoic when I say that, but I'm just getting, I'm thinking about like influences that I want to draw in or just things that I'm hearing in the music that I really want to nail. So I don't think there's too much far out stuff happening in my head, but I don't know. I'll have to go back and check. I'll pay attention next time.
It's funny, man. I think of myself as a very I don't know, maybe you can tell just from talking to me, but I think of myself as a very like comical player, and a lot of times when I'm playing, I feel almost like I'm telling a joke, and like there's a punchline. And certainly if I hear someone's break before me, and I'm going to steal parts of it, and I'm going to like riff off of your ideas, because I think it's really cool when there's a through line between multiple breaks. Sometimes it works out like that. It's like someone just finished with an idea, and I start with that idea, because isn't that cool?
Yeah, I've definitely. I don't play like that a lot, but I've done that before. There are certain songs that really, really call for it. We'll do Cricket on the Hearth during our shows every now and then, and we do that the way Sutton did the second section. I know he did it live. I'm not sure if he recorded it this way, but we'll do it where the instruments trade on the second section. I think it's on the 5 chord, and so we'll totally goof off with each other and steal ideas and the musical smartasses during that part.
It's a good feeling. It's a funny thing to do. I always notice, like in my circle of friends, the joke is the triplet licks right here. Right? Yeah, of course. If you hear someone doing that cheesy lick, then yeah, you're gonna come up and you're gonna go. Right? Suddenly everything becomes this idea because I'm gonna make fun of you, right?
My go-to joke will be something like unexpectedly traditional. Like if I'm playing like on their Cricket on the Hearth thing, I might have played a bunch of more modern licks, and then when it comes around to that part where we're trading off, I might just sort of a really sarcastic G-run, and it has a certain effect.
That's good. I really like the sarcastic G-run when you're playing Foggy Mountain Special. It comes around for the guitar break, and you play the real Lester Flatt break. That's so funny when people do that.
Yeah, I don't think I ever have, but I'm sure I will at some point.
That is a move for the future. I wouldn't be a very good interviewer if I didn't ask you about this album. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, man. It's called Tribulation, and it's kind of got a theme that goes through it. You can tell from the title, we did different songs about hard times, trying times, and it hits in different ways. There are some songs that portray that very darkly, and then there's one that even sort of approaches it from a comical way. Fun putting it together because we have this vision of doing Appalachian music, but it's not a throwback band. We're not playing interpretations like note for note interpretations of old-time string bands. It's very much an inspired by style that's filtered through the different abilities we've built up through our careers. So there are some tunes that actually are old mountain tunes that we put our own spin on, and then there are some things that we find that have been written recently that sound really old, and we'll do some of those. And then Jim Van Cleve has even written a couple tunes that sound appropriate. So we kind of get to stretch out, but have to control the vision of it at the same time. So it's an interesting balance. And for me personally, I get to pull from particular influences. For when it comes to flat picking, I'll think of, this tune really needs Norman, or this tune really needs Doc, or something like that, or Mother Maybelle. Whatever it is, I get to pull from different things that are not your standard, Tony Rice licks, Brian Sutton licks, all that stuff. I have to focus on particular influences, and that's been great fun putting that together for this album.
So you said the album dropped today. Where can the people listen to it?
It's on all the streaming services. It's on iTunes, and you can get physical copies on the Appalachian Roadshow website. I believe it's theappalachianroadshow.com. And once we finally get on the road, you can buy it at the CD table too.
That's good, man.
Since I got away from the initial, over adjustment on either side of the Tony Rice thing, I feel way more relaxed about it now. So when I do completely dive into his stuff, it feels so good. I kind of save it for a certain point in the show or a certain song, because sometimes it's just damn fun, and especially when you're playing with Todd Phillips. Every now and then we'll do Blue Ridge Cabin Home in our sets, like especially in a longer set when we got some time. We've gone through a lot of the album material. We'll do some standard stuff, and if we do that song, these days I don't ever do anything but play solo off of the record.
Here we go. Let's see if we can both play, right? I think that's all I can remember off the top of my head. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that ending is so cool too. This Yeah,
it's fun.
Speaking of just playing Tony Rice breaks like it's no big deal, because that proves that we've just spent way too much time on this thing. I went to film a video. I was going to do a transcription for "Don't Give Your Heart to a Rambler," that break, and I listened to it, and I was like, "Oh, I can already play this." And I honestly don't know if I learned it before at some point or if I just listened to it and I was like, I know all of these licks. But it was a really almost like personally embarrassing moment where you listen to the thing and you're like, I already know this.
Yeah, I think there's actually something good going on there. You know, in all seriousness, I think that's a weird point that just came up. I know we're chasing rabbit trails is the name of the game, so I'll go for it. But I think it's a really good thing to encourage people to play guitar in your head, to think about it all the time, and to listen analytically and try to hear things and figure them out as you're listening. You know, I've done so much of that, especially growing up when I was really on fire and getting into it and really getting obsessed with it for the first time. It's practice time, because the mental component of it is so important. You know, I think if you were to add all that up and add it to your practice hours, you know, that are going towards your, you know, what counts for expertise, yeah, it totally counts. You know, and it's not going to be 100% accurate because you got to figure it out physically, but it's a huge part of it. So that's actually a really good thing, as much as we joke about it, for people to try. You know, if you're driving, put that thing in that you've heard a million times and listen to it, break it down, analyze it, see if you can sort of feel where it goes, and it turns into like a Jedi mind trick for guitar.
Yeah, it is. The phenomena that you're describing, I'm so familiar with. Sometimes if I'm listening to a break, if I just sort of imagine that a guitar is in my hands, we're getting woo-woo again, we're turning into Yoda. If I imagine a guitar in my hands, I can, like, you know, just see how it's positioned on the fretboard sometimes. Like, sometimes it's just immediately clear to me how whatever it was played, even without thinking about any theory, without thinking about any of that stuff. It just the fog just kind of clears, which is really strange. Yeah.
For me, growing up, the time I felt that the most is when I started trying to play mandolin, because I think I had a really cheap one sitting around the house when I was like 12, and I just figured out enough to know how it was tuned, and then I just remember sort of visualizing the fingerboard and thinking about how things probably fit together, and then trying it when you get home, and made a ton of progress. You know, I got a bunch of work done before I could even get the thing in my hands.
When I was a kid and I was learning like simple scale shapes and stuff like that, I would run those like in my head as I was falling asleep. And that's a habit that is definitely carried on to adulthood. There's so many times where almost like I just become conscious in my moment, and I'm like 12 bars into a break for Blackberry Blossom or something. Like, you know, my head's just been churning through something.
Yeah. Happens in the shower a lot too. Write solos in the shower.
You know what would be really cool is having a shower guitar. If you got like we're so far off topic, but if you had like a plastic guitar and it was hanging up in the shower, that would be sick.
Yeah, let's get Rain Song or CA to get to work on that.
I'll call them right now, and they'll sponsor our shower guitars.
This is probably going to have some bloopers or outtakes or something. This really went places.
Well, thanks for coming along with us, folks. This definitely got weird. So hopefully 90% of that made it in there, but there's no way that it can't, because we've been on this call for a good amount of time. Zeb, why don't you tell the people where they can find you, your YouTube channel, all that good stuff?
Okay, yeah, my YouTube channel is just Zeb Snyder Music. I use that handle for Twitter and Instagram as well. You can find me on Facebook. Right now, my personal page is bigger than my professional page, so feel free to find me on there. All the stuff's public, and you can use either one. And then the Appalachian Roadshow, you can find them all over social media. Bunch of good YouTube stuff up, and that's pretty much it, I guess.
Yeah, man, that's good. Sign up for Lessons with Zeb because my schedule is packed.
Let's do it.
All right, folks, you know what to do. You're on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hopefully, I will see you next week for another video.
That midnight train